Does getting licensed for a radio program, whether it's ham radio, GMRS radio, commercial band radio, does getting a license or not getting a license, does this affect your First Amendment rights inside the USA? The First Amendment gives you freedom of speech, among other things, and does making you get a license to talk on certain bands affect that right in the USA? We're going to talk about that right now. The short answer to that question is no, it does not. Okay, now let me explain exactly what I mean, because the First Amendment guarantees you 5 things inside the United States. The first 10 amendments to the U.S. Constitution are called the Bill of Rights. Pretty much everyone knows what the Second Amendment says, but the First Amendment's probably the most important one of the list. You can kind of make an argument that all of them are important and then this one's more important. I don't know, however you want to do it. But it's important to define what the First Amendment actually says. So I have it right here. This is from constitution.congress.gov. Okay, this is a direct quotation of the First Amendment, which I will read. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. So freedom of religion is the first thing mentioned in the First Amendment. Or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press. And that's pretty much all it says about free speech. Or abridging the freedom of speech. Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of a religion or abridging freedom of speech or freedom of the press. So that's 2 and 3. Or the right of the people to peacefully assemble, mostly peaceful protests. You know, you got to be actually peaceful to be protected by the Second Amendment. And to petition the government in redress for grievances. So you can petition the government for grievances. You can peacefully assemble. You have the right to free speech, freedom of religion, and freedom of the press. I personally don't think freedom of the press gives the press the right to say just whatever they want to. I think it gives the right to accurately report on what the press is saying. Kind of side tangent here. If you go read the Declaration of Independence, you will see how many times King George is referenced about doing things that violate all 5 of these things inside of the First Amendment. The First Amendment is a direct response to the violations of King George of England, that he was repressing the people of England at the time in the 1700s. If a news article would write something unfavorable about him, he'd throw him in jail. If someone would say out loud something about the king, he'd throw him in jail. Sometimes he would kill them. So this is a direct response to that. There's a big long story for that. We're not going through that today, but go read the Declaration of Independence and you'll get a little bit of backstory on why the First Amendment says everything that it does. So the freedom of speech part inside of the First Amendment is actually quite small. It says, Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion or prohibiting free exercise thereof, free exercise of religion, or abridging the freedom of speech. So what does that mean? I think it's clear to define. Okay, Congress shall make no law. That is what a lot of people miss, in my opinion. That's what a lot of people miss. Okay, so it is impossible for Facebook or YouTube or Twitter or X, if you want to call it X now, whatever you want to call it. It's impossible for these companies to violate your freedom of speech. Freedom of speech can only be violated by government, at least as far as the First Amendment goes. The First Amendment protects your right to free speech, inasmuch as it says that the government cannot come in and tell you what you can and can't say. They can't come into your home and tell you what you can and can't say in recordings, in broadcast television, in radio, in blogs, in websites, whatnot. You can't, the government cannot come in and tell you that. If I put up a Facebook video or a YouTube video about some kind of controversy, something controversial, something that is a heated debate over anything, okay? I'm not going to give you an example. And Facebook decides to take it down, or YouTube decides to demonetize the video or perhaps take it down or something like that. That's not a violation of my free speech. And the reason for that is because I can't come to your home or sit in your car. Cars are an extension of the castle law in Texas. I think a lot of states that applies as well. I can't come into your property and just start railing about whatever I want to. I can't come into your home and start using a bunch of profanity and talking about stuff you don't want to hear without your permission, okay? And if you ask me to shut up, and I don't, you ask me to leave, you kick me out of your home, which you have complete right to do, That's not a violation of my First Amendment. It's your home. It's a violation of your home at that point in time. YouTube gives me a free account on their platform that they do not owe to me. They don't owe me anything. Their program and their setup for how they do YouTube is great because they give you a free platform to make content. You make content, and then once you get big enough, they pay you commissions on the advertising. They share advertising with you, and they were the first ones to do this. Okay, Vimeo was around back then. There used to be a thing called Vine. I never looked at Vine, but YouTube was one of the first ones to actually share revenue, advertising revenue, with their creators. It's one of the reasons they're so big today. But they give me a platform, and they can regulate what I say on their platform, and it's not a violation of the First Amendment because it's their platform. Now, should they be more even-keeled about it as far as conservative, liberal, right and left? Yes, I think they should, but it's their platform regardless. I told you I was going to give you a little bit of First Amendment lesson, at least the way I see it. If you think that I am wrong with any of this, if you think my perspective is off with any of this, I'd love to hear a comment below. Please be polite. If you're going to come in there and just be one of those buttheads that just rails, I'm going to delete your comment. But if you want to have an adult discussion, you know, if you're over the age of 12 and you want to have and you're capable of having an adult discussion, please put a comment below. I really would love to hear what you think. The case of radio, getting a radio license does not violate your First Amendment rights, and I'm going to explain why I think that, okay? One of the easiest things to relate it to is, can you buy a police and fire radio and just talk on it at random? Can you get on the police and fire frequencies in the city or county or state in your area and just key up those frequencies and start talking to the police department? The answer is no, you can't. Now, a lot of these systems are encrypted. A lot of them have authentication on the radio to where even if you had a radio on the right frequencies and color codes and P25 settings, you wouldn't be able to key up in the system because the system doesn't recognize the ID of your radio. But leaving all of that aside for the moment, if you are in an area that uses just straight up old analog UHF or 800 megahertz frequencies with no type of encryption or authentication, would you be able to key up and talk to the police department and fire department on their frequencies? And the answer is no. You would be asked to stop, fined, and you would have your radio equipment confiscated if you kept going long enough. You're not allowed on those frequencies. You, as a citizen of the United States, can go purchase your own commercial frequency. I think they're around the 450 megahertz range. I think you can probably get some around the 160 megahertz range too, but it is totally possible to go purchase your own commercial frequency, and then you can pretty much do whatever the heck you want to on it. You can give access to your friends, you can give access to your family, you can talk whatever you want to. You don't have to have a license, you don't have to have, other than the license you purchase, you don't have to use call signs, you don't have to do this, you can use profanity, you can do whatever you want to, and you can share it with who you want to. But if someone came onto your frequency in your area and started using it without your permission, you would want them to stop. You would want to say, hey, this is my frequency, I've paid for it, I need you to leave. And if they didn't, you would want to file some sort of grievance or complaint or some kind of charge against them to get them to stop and from using the frequency that you have paid for. So ham radio works the same way. In fact, so does GMRS and CB and FRS radio and all these other radios, and I'm going to tell you exactly why I think that in 1 minute. But I want to tell you first today that we are sponsored by realestateforlife.org. If you are looking at moving sometime in the near future, moving to a warmer state or a more family-friendly region, I highly encourage you to contact Real Estate for Life and talk to one of their 1,400 conscientious and experienced real estate agents throughout North America, USA, and Canada. They support veterans, they support Ham Radio 2.0, and they are very easy to work with, even for financial planning. So if you do contact them, the link will be in the description below. Please let them know that you heard about them on Ham Radio 2.0. Ham radio requires you to get a license, to take a test and get a license. And as I've said in previous videos, guys, okay, I know a lot of people don't like the FCC. And you know what? I kind of don't blame you for not liking the FCC. I kind of don't blame you, okay? But licensing for ham radio across the world and the ARRL themselves in the United States predate the FCC. Okay, so ham radio licensing was a thing long before the FCC was ever created by one of our presidents. On that side. Yeah, so just going to say that out loud. But I get this comment on a lot of videos, and I don't mean to pick on this one person, but this is one of the latest comments I've received. I don't need a license to learn and practice with my firearm or prepare to use it. That certainly should be true if it's not. In some states, that's not true, sadly. As such, I don't need a license to learn and practice with my ham radio either. Incorrect. My arm is covered under the Second Amendment. He means my firearm. of the U.S. Constitution. He's certainly correct. My right to communicate freely is covered under the First Amendment of the Constitution. Yes, it is. But your right to communicate freely does not extend to amateur radio. There are free band radio options for that. My response is sadly incorrect. You're right about the 2A part, of course, but the First Amendment has absolutely nothing to do with radio. You can stand on the street corner and scream whatever you want, but that isn't the same thing as using the radio waves. Lots of people choose to misinterpret this fact. So, in my opinion, and if you think about this logically, you can get on free band radio, you can get on CB radio, you can get on FRS radio, and you can say whatever you want to. With a ham radio license, you can get on ham radio and pretty much say whatever you want to. Some repeater owners may ask you not to talk about politics and religion. Some repeater owners may ask you not to use profanity. Most repeaters owners will probably ask you that. But on Simplex and on HF, you hear these things all the time, sadly. But it is a freedom of speech thing. So you can get on there, those radio waves with the proper license and say whatever you want to. You can get on CB and say whatever you want to. If you don't believe me, turn on the CB sometime. But the fact is that your freedom of speech is not violated by licensing on a specific band. Even GMRS, your freedom of speech is not violated by you having to get a GMRS license to get on a GMRS repeater. I know you think that some people think that since you have to have a license and it's issued by the FCC, therefore they're keeping you from saying what you want to, but no, it's not the same thing. They don't prevent you from getting the license. You prevent you from getting the license, not them. You can go get the license, and it's open to anybody. There is no age limit on a ham radio license. If you can study and pass the test, you can get a license. GMRS license, all you got to do is pay for it, and you have a license. I don't know if there's an age limit on that or not, but since a GMRS license covers your whole family, the mother or father of the household can go get a license, and it covers all the kids also. So they can get on GMRS and use it as much as they want to. And if you don't want to get a license, you can use a free band radio, like a CB radio or an FRS radio or certain marine band frequencies, or you can go purchase your own commercial frequency, like I mentioned earlier. Okay, so I know that you think there are some people think, well, since it's a license, they're violating my freedom of speech. No. Ham radio waves are our airwaves that we have owned. We've been proprietors of, let me put it that way, for longer than the FCC has been around. And we have licensing for that fact, and it's a worldwide event. There are ham radio licenses in every country around the planet. There are ham radio airwaves, designated airwaves for every country around the planet, and those are restricted for people who choose to go get a ham radio license. GMRS is the same thing. PMR 446, or whatever they call it over in the UK, kind of the same thing. CB radio, 11 meters around the planet, same thing. It is free band in most countries, but I think some countries still make you get a license for even 11 meters. So it is your choice to go get a license or not, okay? And if all you want to do is get on the air and talk about your First Amendment rights, then use a CB. Use an FRS radio. Go pay the money for a GMRS radio and use that, okay? Because you don't have to study or get a license for that. But no, it doesn't violate your First Amendment rights to restrict certain airwaves, just like the police and fire airwaves, just like the commercial airwaves that the building down the street might use. The business building down the street has probably purchased. You ever walk into a building, you see security guards up front, or you see people walking around with small HTs on their handy talkies on their belt. They might have purchased a commercial frequency that they can use, and you can't get on their frequency because they own it at that point in time. Or at least they're leasing it. Okay, if you ever want to mess with the Walmart employees, they're all on FRS frequencies, so don't tell them I told you that, but sometimes they get on there, hey, you're talking on a commercial No, I'm not. I'm talking on an FRS frequency. You guys decided to use an open and legal and public frequency for your business, and that's not my problem. I have as much right to be here as you do. But if they were to purchase their own frequency, then that story would change. So you have full open access to any band that you want to. Commercial, if you buy it. Police and fire, if you're a police and fire department personnel, you have access to those frequencies. If you're a ham radio operator, you have access to our frequencies. If you're a GMRS radio operator, you have access to our frequencies. I've had a GMRS license for about 15 years. As a CB, as a citizen of the United States, I can talk on FRS, I can talk on certain channels of Marine Band, and I can talk on CB radio. And I can say whatever I want to until someone comes along and asks me to stop. And then there might be some legal stipulations behind that, depending on what I'm saying. It's not a violation of First Amendment to segregate certain airwaves for certain different types of licensing throughout the United States and the world. And ham radio is one of those specific sections of bandwidth, sections of spectrum, sections of frequencies that we get to use and that you can too. No one is stopping you from going to get a license. So go get a license and enjoy ham radio. And I wish you well, and I hope to hear you on the air someday. 73.